He's like, I finally let go and I forgave. Brothers and sisters, may the Lord give you his peace. Father Malachy back here again with you, and a joy, because right now we are in the midst of the greatest week of the year. It's Holy Week. It's holy for a reason. Why is it holy? Because all that we have been journeying through this desert of Lent, but not that, all the journey of life that we have found ourselves in is finding its fulfillment in the mysteries that we celebrate. What's called the Paschal mysteries, right, is sort of the passing over of Jesus, this journey through his suffering, through his death, and his resurrection. And it's not that somehow that journey that Jesus walked through years ago, those experiences that he endured are somehow just a past that we're looking back at, but rather because he is God, a God who's outside of time, a God who is truly human because of what he has done in the incarnation, and a God who wants to raise us up to share in his true divinity. This God invites you and me to enter into the mysteries, to walk with him in this time, to follow in his footsteps as he is journeying, as he is experiencing the agony in the garden, as he's experiencing his friend, not only a disciple with Judas, but his friend, betraying him, as he's experiencing the rejection of the very people he's come to save, the condemnation from chief priest and the condemnation from Pilate, the suffering he'll endure being scourged and crowned with thorns, carrying that cross, bearing its weight, ultimately dying on that cross. And not just giving his life, but pouring out the last drops of his blood and water. All of that leading into the laying of that dead body of Jesus into a tomb, which 3 days later, through a mystery, through a miracle, through a power that is ultimately the power of love, the power of God's love, is resurrected into this new life. And so we're invited to step into this journey. Like he says in John 15, he's inviting us to come and remain in him. Take time during these days, allow your heart to join the heart of Jesus and to stay with him, even if it's difficult, even if in some ways, maybe you don't want to be there. You know, I was talking last week about areas and ways in which maybe we don't want to let Jesus enter in, but sometimes we find ourselves with the Lord, places where he's calling us to, and it's like, I don't want to go there. I don't go into that place. I'd much rather like just sort of skip scene, right? Like straight through Good Friday, and let's go for like Easter Sunday. I'm ready for resurrection. I'm ready for joy. I'm ready for celebration, new life. And yet Jesus says, no, would you come and remain with me? Would you stay with me? And honestly, in my life, brothers and sisters, it's something that I have been experiencing in some places of like real deep just struggle and suffering in my own interior journey of like healing with my story, with my life, with my past, with my family, with all these different parts of just my own heart. I found myself led into places where it's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to move forward. I don't know where to go. And Jesus just looked at me in that place. He says, will you stay with me here? I think he's looking at each of us in this Holy Week. Will you stay with me here? Why? Because if we'll stay with Jesus during these mysteries that we celebrate in Holy Week, I promise you, without fail, there is going to be a moment in that time of staying with his heart throughout the journey of Holy Week when you're going to look at his heart in that moment and you're going to recognize your heart. You're going to recognize the struggle that's going on in your life, and you're going to see it happening in his life. You're going to recognize this like difficulty in being able to trust, and you're going to see there Jesus on the cross, my God, why have you abandoned me? You're also maybe going to find yourselves and maybe in your life a feeling of abandonment. I'm alone, I'm not really sure what's going on. There's confusion. Feel like the people that I thought cared for me have turned their back on me. All these different places in our lives, you know, maybe it's like the sickness of suffering, right? Physical suffering. Here he is with these scourges, these wounds all over his body. And it's like if you look at your heart and you're like, man, it just feels like it's covered in wounds. Look at him. And that's exactly what you'll find. And I think he wants us to do this not just so that it's like, oh, wow. See, when we're willing to take our hearts and bring them to him and to stay with him, then something happens that is a mystery, and it's hard to even sort of get a handle on. And it's this transformation of my suffering, of my pain into something beautiful, something that I couldn't have expected would happen. We work with men in the shelter, spoken about that already. And I remember this one man who came in carrying these deep wounds in his heart, this tremendous suffering. And it's because his family had been horribly slaughtered, killed in the country that he had come from, and suffered this tremendous loss of everyone and everything that he had known and loved. And he carried in him just like an anger and a fierce desire for vengeance for what had happened. And I remember watching this struggle in his heart with this, right? This struggle of like, nobody knows what I've been through. And with all reverence and just receiving him in that place, I'm like, man, I don't know what you've been through. But I said, I do know that there's someone who does know. And just began to encourage him to come to the Lord in prayer, to bring it to Jesus, to come with his heart and sit there with the Lord and allow the Lord to speak to his heart. I remember this work of like struggle in him, man. It was like, he was like, okay, I know that theoretically I'm supposed to forgive. And certainly Jesus is telling me that that's what I'm supposed to do, but I don't want to. It's just not something I'm interested in. I remember seeing the struggle in him. And it was over the course of like half a year of just like wrestling with this. And at the end, I just led him in a prayer at one point saying, like, would you be open to the grace being given from Jesus's heart for you to be able to forgive the way he forgave on the cross? And he's like, I can't do that. I was like, that's exactly what I'm saying. You can't do that. Like, we can't redeem our own brokenness and our wounds. We can't give ourselves the capacity to love like God loves. We can't forgive the way God forgives. That's the whole deal. He wants you to come to him, be united to him, and through that power that flows from his heart into our heart, to be able to do something that you couldn't have done, or to allow him to do something to you that you can't do for yourself. It was actually a month or so after he had left, and we had said a prayer that day. He gave God permission to give him the grace. That's it. He didn't do any forgiving. He didn't do any letting go and surrendering. He's just like, Jesus, if you can give me this grace, like, I'm open to it. And I remember seeing him a month later, and I was driving through the Bronx, and I'm at a stoplight, and he comes running up to the car, and he's like, bangs on the window, and he's like, Father, how you doing, man? I'm like, hey, dude, good to see you. And so we're chatting. He was like, listen, he just looks at me. He's like, I did it. And I was like, what'd you do, bro? He's like, I finally let go and I forgave. And then he just had this smile on his face. It was just absolutely like this joy. He was like, it's not easy. I was like, I know it's not easy. But even more so, Jesus knows it's not easy. But I could see the freedom that had come from his heart staying with Jesus, staying with him through that moment of the passion, staying with him there at the cross, not moving away, but remaining. And by remaining, being given the gift to experience the redemption that Jesus brings to everything in our lives, everything in our hearts. Brothers and sisters, that's what he wants for you. This is the celebration, the holiness of this week, is that God comes into our real lives, our real hearts, all that entails. And he comes with his own human heart, filled with his divine love. And when he enters in, he transforms it. The cross becomes the tree of life, becomes the place where this river of life flows from his heart that's pierced and open. And then laying down with him in a tomb doesn't become something that is filled with anxiety anymore, but in fact filled with the peace and the hope of the promise that we know that if we died with him, we're also going to rise with him. And boy, when resurrection comes, you can't beat it. But it's only possible to know the joy of resurrection if we stayed with the heart of Jesus, walking through the mystery of this suffering and this death and this dying, this surrendering of all things, this laying down. And in that moment of total surrender and total trust in the love of the Father, he reveals who he is and the power, the miracle, the beauty of the resurrection. I'm praying for that grace for you, praying it for my own heart, praying that we can stay with him in these days so that we will know the fullness of the joy of salvation. God bless.